Hey, it's Jason Maxwell here from JMax Fitness, and I have a really awesome interview for you today. I'm interviewing Mike Samuels of healthylivingheavylifting.com, and we're going to talk about getting stronger, DUP, and all that great stuff. So, Mike, let's take it away. Introduce yourself, buddy.
Hey Jason, thanks for having me. As you said, I run Healthy Living Heavy Lifting. I'm based in the UK. I'm an online coach, a fitness writer, and competed in men's physique and powerlifting in the past.
Nice. It's kind of interesting because I've seen you online for, I feel like I've known about you for like 3 or 4 years. And I remember you did like this amazing transformation at one point, but what's really the story about how you got into fitness in the first place?
I think it's probably a typical story that a lot of guys in the industry have, where I was the fat kid at school, and so I was always picked last for sports and kind of teased about my weight a bit. And so initially lost a lot of that weight by taking up long distance running. And I went long distance running, did all the typical like clean eating stuff and everything. Then actually started in the paleo diet, and so started eating loads of high fat foods and nuts and fatty meats and stuff, and ended up getting quite fat. And so it was then that I did my transformation that I've kind of written about and blogged about before. That was, I suppose, my discovery of flexible dieting, so to speak. And I started taking weight training more seriously, started training for strength, learned about macros and calories, and it was at that point that I was already a personal trainer, but I decided to take that into the online world and start coaching clients online and blogging. And yeah, it's been, I think I started off Healthy Living Heavy Lifting in about February 2013. So yeah, it's been about 3 and a bit years since I started out.
Nice. So what you're saying is you were chubby at first, and then you started doing some running, long distance running, and then the paleo diet made you chubby again, and then you're like, I gotta figure out the solution. Is that what I'm hearing?
Pretty much, yeah. I think I took paleo to the extreme where, if coconut oil is good, that means you need to have 3 tablespoons of it every meal. And yeah, sort of, filling up on high fat meats and almonds and all of that. So not there's anything inherently bad about doing that, but I just kind of took it to the extreme and didn't worry about calories and macros and stuff, and thought all carbs were evil. So just ate loads of fat, basically.
hmm So when you did that really successful transformation, was there like some kind of undergoing motivation that made you decide, I really want to change my body for the better? Like what was going on, deep down inside Mike Samuel's brain there?
I think it was the fact that, like I said at the time, I was already a personal trainer and thought that I wasn't really the best walking billboard for my business, and that actually, while I don't think you have to be in godlike shape year round, I thought that I was training hard and I didn't really look like I was training hard. I was just carrying too much body fat. So decided there needed to be something done to kind of make me look more in shape and to, actually look like I trained and practice what I preach.
So just curious, how did the way you trained your clients, how did that evolve since, you started personal training up until even now?
I'd say that certainly with the diet side, things have changed a lot. I used to give clients a whole sheet of foods you shouldn't eat, and go the typical kind of bro rules of eating every 2 to 3 hours, 6 to 8 meals a day, carbs only around workouts. So that's completely changed now, for the fact that I get most clients to track their nutrition, whether that's calories and protein or strict macro tracking. And certainly with the training side of things, I now have kind of a strength element in every client's program. So whether one of their primary goals is to like compete in powerlifting, or they're just training for kind of fat loss and aesthetics, I certainly do a lot less kind of, higher rep circuit style stuff and cardio now than I ever used to. I'm now much more about the sort of let the strength training takes care of the muscles and, the strength, and let the diet take care of fat loss. So training is a lot more strength orientated now.
Nice. Yeah, I know whenever I read something that you write, it's always has to do with one or two things, either like kind of on the theme of one or two things, either flexible dieting or strength training. And specifically, I see that you're known now as being like one of the DUP guys, or daily undulating periodization. So I was wondering if you could briefly just describe what DUP is for people who don't know, um, and then give maybe a brief overview of it too.
Yeah, sure. I think the best way to start off is maybe explaining linear periodization, which is what people tend to be more familiar with, which is typical powerlifting style block periodization. So linear periodization involves having training blocks where you train more kind of with higher reps and lower weight, which typically referred to as an accumulation phase. You'll do that for usually kind of 3 to 6 weeks, maybe up to 8 weeks. Then you'll go to more of an intensification phase, which where the weights come up and number of sets and reps tend to go down. Do that again for kind of 3 to 6 weeks. And then you'll go into like a peaking phase where you're lifting your heaviest weights, closest to your 1 rep max percentage. Reps are a lot lower, and that will last for kind of 2 to 3 weeks. Then you usually deload, so train lighter, and then go back to start another accumulation phase again with lighter weights and higher reps. That works, and it can work really, really well. But the trouble with typical linear periodization is that you tend to accumulate gains in your certain rep ranges and with certain weights in one phase. And then once you switch to another one, your body adapts more to doing what you're doing at the time. And so by the time you come back around again to a block, you've often lost some of the gains that you made initially from that phase. What undulating periodization does is it mixes up the different rep ranges and loading parameters. So for instance, instead of having like one block where you're training, say, lighter weights, high reps, then moderate and moderate, and then heavy weights, low reps, you would tend to have kind of each week will be maybe a light, a medium, and a heavy session. You'll repeat that. So that's kind of a basic structure. And most people with daily undulating periodization, excuse me, will do that where they have one light, one medium, one heavy session each week on each of the main lifts. So squat, deadlift, and bench press. And that's kind of the most simple setup, really. And you aim to each week or each training block increase volume over time, and so that you keep the gains and keep the adaptations ongoing, whereas often that can be lost with linear periodization.
Very cool. So what's the story behind DUP? Like, how did you discover it? And then what kind of results did you get with it?
Well, I was first introduced to it by Lane Norton, who's been my coach for over 4 years now, I think. And
wow, 4 years, eh?
Yeah, time flies. And he'd been kind of experimenting quite a lot with it from his coaches. I believe he was coached by a guy called Mike Zordos, who's kind of I suppose people refer to him as like the godfather of DUP. He's the guy who really brought it into the mainstream with his research the last few years. And so I've been initially used to doing more of a body part style split, and then I got into like a block periodization fashion after that. And then I kind of got more into the idea of mixing up rep ranges. So having like one strength day and one hypertrophy day per muscle group each week. And so this was kind of the next logical step. So I was set up with sort of quite a basic DUP template. But what I found was that the lifts I was working on, which for me were squat, deadlift, and bench press, suddenly became a lot more natural. I sort of started seeing gains more regularly. Wouldn't say like strength went up insanely, certainly went up quite a lot and more than it was doing when I was doing more of a block periodization, but certainly noticed that I was performing better every session. As I said, just for the fact you're doing a lift kind of at least a couple of times a week, technique feels so much smoother, feels so much more comfortable. And so I took that, then tried a few different variations of the training template that were designed for me by Lane, and used that then competing in my next powerlifting meets. So I actually managed to put weight onto my total while competing in a lighter weight class. So for me, that was kind of pretty cool that, yeah, strength went up a bit while body weight dropped. So pound for pound, I was a hell of a lot stronger.
Yeah, that's actually pretty fantastic. So how did your body handle doing like switching to that very high frequency approach of DUP then?
At first, it's a bit of a shock to the system, especially I think if you're going to go into a DUP like 3 times a week template straight from only training things once a week, you'd notice a massive amount of muscle soreness. So if people are going to do that, I'd say maybe go to like a twice a week structure on each lift first of all. But it wasn't too bad going from like twice a week to 3 times a week, even though before I've been doing more exercise variation rather than just like the big 3 lifts and some accessories. But on the whole, it wasn't too bad, I think, because again, the general premise is that you set things up, not too close to like a maximum intensity. So there's always going to be a couple of reps left in the tank. And so, it's that idea that you don't need to get ridiculously sore or train to the point of puking to actually make strength gains. And in fact, easing things back and training, a rep or 2 away from failure, which DUP tends to encourage, is actually going to be better for you in the long run. You'll still get the muscular adaptations and you'll still get the strength gains. So for me, doing it in kind of a sensible way, I think I didn't notice too much detriment in terms of like performance and soreness in the early stages.
Okay, so why do you think not going to like absolute failure, but training more frequently will work better in the long run? Why do you think that is?
There's a few reasons. I actually put a blog together recently on it, so kind of fresh at the top of my mind at the moment.
Perfect.
But one is just for technique. So when you're training really close to failure, your technique is going to kind of start to go towards the end of a set. And actually with strength, where it's a skill and you kind of have to practice it and practice it with good technique, a lot of it is based around kind of central nervous system recruitment and learning a movement pattern. And so if you're always training to failure, a lot of your reps are going to be really poor quality. And so just easing back a touch allows you to kind of keep that good form, ingrain the movement patterns a lot better. And so long term, you'll progress. Same thing, one of the biggest things people can do to get stronger is just train consistently. And the best way to do that is stay injury free. Obviously, if you're always going to failure, especially if you're training to absolute failure at the point where you're failing reps, then actually there's a huge risk of injury, especially on like the squats and deadlifts. So if you can manage to remain injury free for a whole training cycle and for a whole year, then again, looking long term, you're going to get much, much better results. Same time, there's the idea that by always leaving a few reps in the tank, you're always kind of increasing your ceiling. So if you're always training right at the point where you can't get any higher, then actually it's going to be really difficult to progress. Whereas you're always leaving a bit in the tank, then each session will get a bit stronger, but that ceiling moves higher as well. So it's that idea of, not going absolutely all out every workout is something that a lot of people struggle with. But again, if we're looking long term, then a bit more of a moderate approach and just holding back a touch is going to do far better than always, engaging beast mode, as people tend to say.
So how would you put together, like, let's say just a simple 3-day per week routine for the squat, bench, and the deadlift using DUP? And then how would you progress week by week and month per month to make sure that they're still getting stronger?
Cool. So for me, I think a basic structure is, as I mentioned earlier, kind of one light day, which would be, I suppose, starting off nice and simple. If you kept everything at 3 sets to begin with, so you might train Monday, Wednesday, Friday, each day would be squat, deadlift, bench press, and you do 3 sets on each. What you might do is on the Monday, train your squat in the strength rep range, train your deadlift in the hypertrophy rep range, and your bench press more of an endurance rep range. So you might do strength for your first block would be sets of 5. So you do squat for 3 sets of 5 on a Monday, deadlift for 3 sets of 5 on a Wednesday, and bench press for 3 sets of 5 on a Friday, using around about 80% of your 1 rep max. Then you could do your hypertrophy rep ranges for sets of 8, say at 70%. So you might do deadlift at 3 sets of 8 on a Monday, whatever I'm wanting it, squat on a Wednesday, and then bench press on a Friday. And then your endurance stuff could be around about 65% for sets of 10 to 12. And again, you do 3 sets, whatever day you're doing it, and split them up each day of the week. So that'd be quite a simple way to do it. And then weekly, you could progress that by, say, adding a rep. So your strength work goes from 5 reps to 6, hypertrophy from 8 to 9, and your endurance from like 12 to 13 or something. Or you could add sets. And then between blocks, you might run that for kind of 3 or 4 weeks, trying to increase the reps or sets each time. Then you take a deload, so train quite light, sort of train at 50 to 70% on, say, week 5. And then the next block round, you'd either increase the maxes you're working with, or you could do some things like throw in AMRAP sets, which are like max rep sets. You could do one of those on each strength day. You could add an extra day on a lift or a couple of lifts, and just generally try and increase overall volume. Volume being weight lifted times total reps. So provided that's going up from block to block, then you're in kind of a good place. You know that you're going to be progressing strength-wise.
Okay. One thing I've noticed with a few people is once they get like a really strong deadlift, I feel like it's going through the workout, like doing those 4 sets of 8 are just brutal. So what do you recommend in that case? Would you just stick with the deadlift and training at that frequency, or would you have to dial it back?
I definitely think dial it back. And this is where individual kind of experimentation comes in with it. For me, or I've found that people have different frequencies at which they can train hard on a lift. And typically people will be able to do kind of the most volume the most intensity most frequently on a bench press, then on a squat, and then on a deadlift. So you might find, like you said, deadlift is the key one, that actually you can only train really hard on a deadlift once a week. And so in that case, what you could do is on the other days that you're supposed to do deadlift, you could either do something else. So you could do like a lighter deadlift variation, like a Romanian deadlift or a stiff leg or a deficit, just working at like a lower intensity. You could always do kind of a couple of light sessions on the deadlift, always leaving 2 reps in the tank. Or you could even do some speed work or something. So train light, do some technique work like that. So it's definitely not a strict system, and that's why I kind of like how you can modify it towards your goals. I think a lot of people do think of it as how I described it initially, which is a light day, a medium day, and a heavy day, and they think you have to go absolutely all out all the time, which definitely isn't the case. Another thing you could do if you're feeling like that is when you set up your cycle at the start and you think about your 1 rep maxes and what percentages you're going to be working at, is potentially, I'll always tell people that for their training maxes, they use 90% their actual max. So, if you can squat 300 pounds and actually you'd use 270 pounds as your training max to work out all the weights, what you could do with the deadlift is use, say, 85% of your actual max when working out your training loads. Again, just so that you're always leaving a bit in the tank and training hard, but not completely beating yourself up.
Okay. And what's your strategy behind accessory work then?
Again, I think tailor it to the individual. So for instance, there's kind of 3 things that accessory work should do. One is protect you from injury. So that's why I always like people to get in exercises in there, like face pulls for shoulder health, and like some extra hamstring work, just because I think that, or hamstring and glute, because that protects the lower back. So preventing injury. Also want to bring up weak points as well. So obviously for a lot of people, if your sticking point in a squat is just out of the hole, then at some stage you might need to bring in some accessory work to target that specifically. And also to build muscle, because if you could only do 3 exercises, then the squat, the deadlift, and the bench press would probably be that. But fortunately, we've not got, or don't have to make that choice. So actually including a bit of accessory work for muscle growth is a good thing. My general stance to the accessory work is that you shouldn't need really any other sort of squat and deadlift variations. But what you want to do is focus on the muscles that aren't hit as much. So definitely upper back, probably some shoulders in there as well, definitely some direct arm work and some calves. Obviously, if you're a powerlifter training more for strength, you're not going to need all of that. You might just do some dumbbell work to help you bench press, some upper back work to balance out and prevent injuries, and maybe that bit of hamstring and glute work, some glute ham raises, some back extensions. But if you're a bodybuilder, there's no harm in throwing in 2 accessory days a week and going really hard on the arms and the back, provided it's not impacting on your recovery and total work you can do on the big 3 lifts.
Okay, cool. So let's say you have a lifter that comes to you and he says, Mike, in 12 months, I want to compete in my first powerlifting meet and I want to do an amazing job. How would you kind of schedule his training year leading up to that?
I'll probably kind of reverse engineer it, as the phrase goes. So, we definitely look at kind of before his meet, he'd want his peak a few weeks before that. So kind of working up some really heavy singles, doubles and triples before having a deload before the meet. And then throughout the year, I'll kind of do like, I suppose, a wave loading type of thing. So you'd start him off probably working at like a bit of a light or a lower volume with DUP and maybe kind of some lower loads. So he's not training too close to his 1 rep max. So you might do a bit more work in like the endurance and hypertrophy rep ranges. Wouldn't get too close to the 1 rep max or wouldn't kind of push for lots of heavy AMRAP sets, but gradually kind of bring them up in a bit of a peak for the first couple of months. Then again, have a bit of a deload, bring up another peak, deload, and then gradually do that again up to the meet. I think the closer you get to the meet as well, the more specific you're going to want to get the lift. So for instance, let's just say that, you found that getting him to do heavy backs or getting to do back squats 3 times a week was playing havoc with his elbows or his shoulders or something. In the early stages, there'd be no harm in putting in some front squats or some safety bar squats or some kind of squatting variation that didn't cause those issues, provided you're still squatting a few times a week. As you got closer to the competition, you take out the accessory work and get more kind of lift specific, because obviously he needs that practice and that time under the bar. So generally you build up his volume throughout the year, but certainly have times in there when you're working lighter and just recovering to make sure that his overall work capacity was kind of good and he wasn't getting too beat up and injured.
Okay, cool. And then what if, for instance, he said he wanted to compete in bodybuilding? How would that change?
I think bodybuilding and powerlifting are sort of can go together, but I don't think you can do one optimally alongside the other. So if his primary goal was bodybuilding, say in 12 months, obviously kind of diet's going to play more of a role with that as well. But what we do is say the first 6 to 8 months, look to get kind of a lot of volume work in there, particularly some heavy stuff when he's probably still going to be in a calorie surplus and still gaining some muscle. We really try and push the volume on pretty much everything. Look at bring up some weak points. So we touched on accessories earlier. What you might do is, for instance, start with kind of 2 days a week just on the main lifts, and then put in some more work for, if his arms are a weak point, we might put in 2 specific arm days a week, and then another day for kind of back and shoulders and stuff. And as we got close to the competition, we probably just work on maintaining overall volume on the big lifts. Not doing too much accessory work, because if he's kind of going into a calorie deficit to burn some fat, then he's not going to be building any muscle. So actually we just look at maintaining what you have through some big basic lifts. So would be a slightly different approach really. We'd look at actually sort of easing up towards the end of the year rather than with a powerlifter we kind of try and peak them.
Is that, I remember you did a show maybe about a year ago, maybe a little bit longer. Is that similar to the approach that you used for your show?
Pretty much, or I found that leading up to the first show particularly, my strength's actually still pretty good because I didn't have to drop too much weight for it. And so actually I was still kind of increasing strength. So going with the more like powerlifting approach that I just outlined, and actually kind of did have a think about doing a competition at that time. But I found that between my first and second shows, I kind of had to keep dieting. That took its toll. And so I went more towards like the second approach. So I didn't do quite as much heavy stuff just because I found strength was going down. It was more toll on the joints because I had less body weight. So actually I worked more on kind of higher rep ranges with lighter loads. Not for the idea that a lot of people have of, high reps, burn fat or tone muscle or whatever, because as we both know, it's kind of nonsense, but just because it was difficult to keep up overall strength. So I did try and maintain volume, by doing lighter loads for more total reps.
Okay, so you mentioned it took a toll on you after a while. So how did that feel like through that process? Like, did it suck a lot or was it okay? Like, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it was. To be fair, like some of it was okay. So I never found hunger was too bad. My calories didn't get too low. I think the lowest calories got was about 2,100 a day, which isn't great, but it's not awful. Again, carbs are only ever down at kind of 150 grams at their lowest, I think. So not horrendous. Didn't suffer too much with hunger, but certainly tiredness was a big factor. Lack of energy, feeling kind of quite agitated and quite stressed as well. And just the fact that it's kind of hard work to get in the gym, particularly towards the end of a diet, if you've lost a lot of weight and your calories aren't too high, then people talk about being able to maintain strength. And in theory, you can, because it is largely neural. But if you're losing mass as well, then strength is going to go down, and it's kind of disheartening getting into the gym, which is another reason why I say, don't have too many strength goals if you're deep into a diet and in quite an aggressive calorie deficit. So yeah, some stuff sucked, other stuff wasn't so bad, but yeah, on the whole, it was a challenging experience.
So what did you do the week leading up to each show to prep? Did you do any of the dehydration stuff or anything with sodium or what?
Not really. I mean, the main changes I made were with macro intake. So both shows I had kind of a carb load just over a week out, see how my body coped with the carbs. So taking around about double the amount of carbs I was having on a normal day. Then we kind of pulled the carbs back a bit just to get rid of any glycogen, any excess water, kind of upped cardio a bit. So I think most of it was about an hour of cardio a day in peak week. And then loaded again in carbs going into the show. Water and sodium remained pretty much consistent. We had a very, very slight rise in both, coupled with higher carb days, and then took them down a bit just leading into the show. And training-wise, training stayed pretty similar. And then just on the show day itself, it was a lot of carbs, a lot of fat, and a lot of sodium. Water wasn't restricted too much at all. So again, I was working with Lane for them, and he's very much of the opinion that water and sodium don't need to change all that much, and actually you should just keep things consistent. So that's what we did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, a lot of experts are starting to say that they're starting to agree with Lane, essentially. I don't know if it's because of Lane that they're starting to realize that, hey, we don't need to change the sodium and water that much, but I'm starting to notice a big shift in the industry, which is kind of cool. And you experienced it and you looked great on stage. So it kind of shows right there that you don't need to drastically dehydrate yourself. Because I imagine when you're on stage, you probably still felt pretty crappy. And imagine if you were dehydrated during that, it would be even worse. So what was that feeling like on stage for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think it was hard work. I mean, you're under bright lights, and in the second show particularly, there were, I think, 16 of us in the category. So it was 25, 30 minutes up on stage, and that was hard work because you got to kind of be on your game the whole time. Posing is a lot more difficult than people imagine. You're just tensing everything all the time. So I think having gone into that on the day itself, having quite a lot of food, it was hard work, but I can't imagine what it'd be like if you were getting into it dehydrated and carb depleted and not with any sodium. Like I said, I think what Lane's doing is that the science has always been there to say that you don't need to do all this water and sodium manipulation, but everyone was doing it anyway. And it's through people like him and other coaches with similar methods that actually now there's kind of the social proof and the visual proof of people following their recommendations and still looking awesome, that the general bodybuilding crowd is now getting this idea that actually we don't need to be so extreme. And if you're going out to compete, then you want to be well hydrated. You want to be able to get a pump from having sodium. You want carbs for energy. And so actually, yeah, the kind of general outlook on it is changing, which is definitely a good thing.
Mm-hmm. So what was going through your head when you were on stage there?
I think it was just remembering everything that I've been taught about posing, because I definitely wasn't the biggest guy out there. So I had to kind of do all that I could to make myself look bigger. So I'd had a posing coach beforehand, and just his words kind of going through your head the whole time, and just trying to hold everything tight, because people always flex their biceps in the gym, which is fine. It's not too demanding at all. But you got to think when you're on stage, you want to not only flex your biceps optimally, you got to kind of flay your lats, you got to turn your calves on, turn your glutes on. You got to try and look like you're not straining really, really hard, and try and sort of smile and appear like it's all quite good fun, really. So just having that going through my head the whole time was the main thing. But yeah, it's quite physically and mentally demanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine. But the results were great. The pictures look so sweet. So that's pretty awesome. Going back to training though, talking about setting up training programs, what do you think separates a good program from a great program?
I think it's probably individualization. So for instance, a good program, there are loads of good programs out there. So 5-3-1, starting strength, juggernaut programs, anything out there that's kind of sensible and well thought out and got a mix of rep ranges, a good selection of exercises, guidelines on loading. All of that makes a good program. I think for a great program is where it comes in. It's like I said, you're able to individualize it. So prime example is what we talked about just a few minutes ago of, deadlifting. And if you find that you can't physically deadlift heavy 2-3 times a week, managing to change it so that you put in some exercise variation in there, or you change up the rep ranges to suit you, change around things like that, really. So that would be kind of, to me, one of the main differences between a good and a great program. And also, to me, a great program has the long term in mind as well. So it's looking after lifters' longevity and allowing them to progress kind of as fast as is possible, but without compromising the rest of their life, their recovery, or risking injury.
Okay, cool. So with going back to your training then, what's your current training program look like, and what's kind of your overall goal right now?
Overall goal is to get back into powerlifting, which I've got a competition planned for November this year. So it's about 6 months away at the moment.
Great. Are you going to grow a mustache for that too, for Movember?
Why not? I may well do. As long as the added weight from the mustache doesn't put me over the weight I need to compete at.
Well, it sounds like you're going to grow a very big mustache then, if that's the case.
Yeah, I've got some time. I might start it before November.
Nice. And then what about training?
So yeah, at the moment it's kind of mixing. There's definitely aspects of DUP in there. So basically squat twice a week, deadlift twice a week, and bench variation 3 times a week. So I found that works quite well for like frequency wise for me. So it's a couple of hard squat sessions, 2 sort of strength bench sessions, and 1 high rep one. And then with deadlift, it's kind of a hard deadlift session and a light deadlift session. And just for that frequency, I found that works really, really well for what I'm doing. At the moment, as I said earlier, where I'm quite far out from competition, there's a lot of accessory as well. So there's a load of upper back work, there's some shoulder work. We've got some single leg stuff, a bit of working with bands and chains. So what will happen is the closer we get to the meet, the more of that stuff will come out and the more volume we'll get in on the big 3 and their variations. But yeah, so there's a lot of aspects of undulating periodization in there, just because I found that's much better than working to a strict block periodization pattern.
Nice. So how many days is that per week that you're getting into the gym?
5 days. So 2 squat and deadlift sessions. One will be kind of squat focused with a lighter deadlift. The other one's a heavier deadlift with a squat in as well. And then 3 bench sessions. So it's like the heavy bench, the light bench, and the accessory bench.
Cool. So that's basically everything I wanted to ask you about strength training and all that great stuff. But now I want to move on to a couple rapid fire questions to kind of end the show. So first things first, I want to ask you, what kind of things are you doing in your life right now to bring you happiness?
Trying to get outside a lot more. The weather in the UK is starting to get a bit nicer. It's probably going to rain again, but trying to get outside to do some more work. Do some more walks, and also if I go to coffee shops to work, I'm trying to sit outside there and just get some more sunshine. Really, spending time with the girlfriend and being outside.
Nice. That's one of my favorite ones. You never underestimate how good sun is for your body.
Oh yeah, vitamin D. It's underrated.
I can't imagine the people that live up north in like Iceland and northern Canada. It must just be brutal.
Depressing.
Next question. What would your profession be if you weren't doing fitness?
Always quite fancy something practical. I think I'd probably go for police or fire service, something like that.
Okay, cool. If you were to buy your 20-year-old self 2 books, one fiction and one nonfiction, which books would you buy yourself? So is this kind of a time travel question because, you know, I'm kind of a time travel geek.
I think for the non-fiction, I'd probably go with the book I was given called Key Person of Influence by Daniel Priestley. Just really good for kind of defining what you want to do and finding your audience and working with your passion. That'd be my non-fiction one. For fiction, I think I was probably reading it around that time anyway, but my favorite book ever is, don't really know why, but it's a book called Death and the Penguin by a Ukrainian author called Andrei Kirkov. But no particular reason, it's just my favorite fiction book. And I think I probably read it when I was about 21, 22 anyway, so I'd give it to myself and get it a bit earlier.
That's cool. I actually haven't heard of that second book. I've heard of Key Person of Influence, though. So I'll definitely have to check them out because I actually lived in Ukraine for 3 months.
Oh, yeah, I remember you saying before, yeah.
Yeah, you should have told me to check out that book. It wouldn't have been in English, though. Yeah, so lastly, where can people go find you online? Where can they hook up with you?
Best place for reading articles would be healthylivingheavylifting.com, or the Facebook business page is obviously facebook.com/healthylivingheavylifting, or just add me on Facebook on my personal account as well. I'm happy to connect and help people out with whatever.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, so many people listening to this, they might or might not know that Mike and I actually have a program together called the DUP method. And that's why we were really getting in and talking shop about DUP and training. And I think Mike is probably one of the best experts on the internet to do with DUP. So what we did was we put together a little free video for you teaching how to set up your own DUP program and how to get stronger. So all you have to do is go to www.jmaxfitness.com/strong, and I'll put the link underneath this video. And what you can do is you can opt in and get that free video that we put together. And it's pretty awesome because, as you can tell by this video, Mike knows his stuff when it comes to DUP and getting stronger. So Mike, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's a pleasure having you. Any last words you want to give the audience?
Just have fun with your training, have fun with your diet. So work hard, but stay consistent. And remember, it's kind of a long game, so enjoy it.
Great. Jason Maxwell from JMax Fitness signing off.